A racist millionaire mocks an elderly black janitor while giving a speech. What he doesn't realize is that she's his mother's best friend. Clara Jenkins adjusted her cap as she pushed her mop across the polished marble floor of the Ainsworth corporate building. With each stroke, she reflected on the decades that had passed since she first stepped foot in this tower of glass and steel. At 78, Clara had become a fixture here, her presence as constant as the building's structural beams. She had raised 3 children, lost her husband to illness, and forged a life filled with hard work and resilience. As she worked, the soft hum of conversations echoed through the expansive lobby. Young professionals in sharp suits and polished shoes rushed past her, their laughter and chatter creating a symphony of ambition and entitlement. Clara smiled at a few of them, recalling their names: Tina, the ambitious intern who often brought her coffee, and Mark, the analytical thinker who always stopped to chat about the weather. They had become her extended family over the years, a stark contrast to the isolation that she sometimes felt at home. Today was a special day. Grant Ainsworth, the heir to the corporate empire, was set to deliver a keynote speech, and the air was thick with anticipation. Clara had seen Grant grow up. He was the son of the late Elizabeth Ainsworth, a woman who had once taken the time to know Clara, often stopping to chat when she visited her mother. Those brief moments had left an imprint on Clara's heart, and even now she felt a sense of loyalty to Elizabeth's memory. As the clock struck 10, the lobby began to fill with employees and guests, their excitement palpable. Clara finished mopping the floor and stepped aside, allowing a clear path for the audience to gather. She took a moment to observe the crowd, noting how the young professionals fawned over Grant as he strutted onto the stage. He was a tall man with slicked back hair, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed privilege. Clara's heart sank as she remembered the stories she had heard about his brash confidence and the disdain he often showed towards those he deemed beneath him. "Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today," Grant began, his voice booming across the room. Clara couldn't help but notice how he commanded the audience's attention, his charm masking the arrogance that lay beneath. He spoke about the company's achievements, the new initiatives, and the future of Ainsworth Enterprises, but Clara's mind wandered. She thought of the countless hours she had spent cleaning these floors, ensuring that the environment sparkled for people like Grant, people who often overlooked the hard work that made their comfort possible. Then, the moment came. Grant leaned on the podium, a smirk dancing on his lips as he began to delve into personal anecdotes. "You know," he said, "I often wonder how some people think they deserve respect just because they wear a uniform. I mean, it's like they forget their place." Laughter erupted from the audience, and Clara felt the blood rush to her face. The comment pierced through her like a dagger, igniting a fire of indignation within her. Clara's grip tightened around the mop handle. How dare he? Did he not see the value in her work? Did he not understand that every corner she cleaned contributed to the image of this empire? She glanced around at the audience, their laughter echoing in her ears, and for a moment, she was paralyzed by the weight of her shame. The very people she had come to care for were laughing at her existence, at the life she had built with sweat and sacrifice. The tension in Clara's chest grew heavier. She wrestled with her emotions. The urge to speak up clashed with her desire to maintain her dignity. She could simply walk away, retreat into the shadows where she belonged, but something deep within her stirred. It was the voice of her mother, who had always taught her to stand tall, to fight against injustice, no matter the odds. As Grant continued, the laughter swelled, and Clara felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. She could feel the eyes of the audience on her, and in that moment, she made a decision. She would not let him mock on her or anyone else in her position without consequence. The years of hard work, the sacrifices, the stories of her life mattered. With her heart pounding in her chest, Clara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. "Excuse me, Mr. Ainsworth," she called out, cutting through the laughter like a knife. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward her. Clara felt the weight of their gazes, a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Grant's confident smile faded as he looked down at her, recognition flickering in his eyes. "What is this?" he asked, feigning nonchalance, though Clara could sense the tension in his posture. "I'm Clara Jenkins, the janitor," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "And I've been cleaning this building for more years than you've been alive. I'm not just a uniform. I'm a person, and I deserve respect. just like anyone else in this room. Gasps filled the hall, and Clara could see the shift in the audience. Grant's smirk was replaced with a frown, and the laughter that had once echoed around them was now replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Clara pressed on, fueled by the energy of the crowd. You speak of achievements, but you overlook the people who make those achievements possible. You've forgotten the lessons your mother taught you about kindness and respect. Grant opened his mouth to respond, but Clara didn't give him the chance. Your mother was a good woman, Grant. She understood the value of every individual, regardless of their position. I knew her well. She was my friend. The revelation hung in the air, and Clara saw a flicker of recognition in Grant's eyes. The audience began to murmur, captivated by the unfolding drama. Grant's facade started to crack, and Clara knew she had struck a nerve. The tension escalated as she continued. You stand there, flaunting your privilege, mocking people like me, but you don't know the blood, sweat, and tears that go into this job. You don't see the sacrifices we make for our families. Grant's expression shifted from disbelief to anger, revealing the entitlement that had shaped him. You think you can come up here and lecture me? This is my company, he retorted, his voice rising. Clara stood her ground, unyielding. And it is people like me who keep it running. You should be ashamed of yourself for disrespecting those who work tirelessly to support you. The climax of the confrontation hung in the balance, and Clara could feel the energy of the crowd shifting in her favor. The audience was no longer passive. They were engaged, some nodding in agreement, others shifting in their seats, clearly uncomfortable with Grant's behavior. The scene unfolded like a slow-motion film, Clara's heart racing as she faced Grant, a young man who had never had to work for anything in his life. In that moment, she felt a surge of empowerment. She was no longer just a janitor. She was a voice, a testament to resilience, and she would not let her dignity be stripped away. The silence in the room deepened, thick with tension as Clara stood her ground, unwavering in the face of Grant's indignation. The audience, once captivated by the spectacle of his wealth and charm, now watched as the dynamics shifted. Clara could feel their eyes on her, a mix of support and disbelief at the confrontation unfolding before them. Grant's bravado faltered slightly, and his jaw clenched as he glanced around the room, sensing the change in energy. You think your words mean anything? He shot back, attempting to regain control of the narrative. You're just a janitor. Your job is to clean, not to lecture me on respect. Clara's heart raced, but she refused to back down. And you're just a man who inherited everything without lifting a finger. You've forgotten the struggles of those who came before you, who worked hard to create a path for people like you. Her voice rang with conviction, echoing against the high ceilings of the corporate building. With each word, Clara felt the power of her history, the generations of her family who had fought against systemic oppression, the struggles they endured so she could stand here today. She remembered her mother's voice, urging her to be proud of who she was, to never allow anyone to belittle her existence. This was her moment to honor that legacy. Grant stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his expression turning from anger to something more vulnerable. You don't know me, he said, his voice dropping slightly. You don't know what I've had to deal with. Do you think I haven't had my share of struggles? Clara replied, her voice steady and clear. You may have money, but that doesn't give you the right to disrespect others. Your privilege has blinded you to the realities of life outside these walls. The audience was now fully engaged, whispers rippling through the crowd. Clara caught sight of a few familiar faces, employees who had always treated her with respect, nodding in agreement. She could feel their support, fueling her resolve. Maybe you should take a moment and listen to the people you belittle, she continued, her voice rising with passion. It's not just about you and your success. It's about the community that supports you, people like me who work hard every day to keep this company running. The tension reached a climax as Grant's expression shifted again, this time to one of realization. Clara saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a crack in the facade he had built around himself. I didn't mean it like that, he mumbled, but Clara could sense it was an excuse, an attempt to deflect responsibility. Then it's time to learn, Clara urged, her tone softening slightly. Your mother would have wanted you to understand the value of every person in this building. She believed in kindness, Grant. She believed that everyone deserved respect. For the first time, Clara noticed the audience's reaction. A collective nodding of heads, murmurs of agreement, and a growing sense of solidarity. The laughter that had once filled the room was replaced with a profound realization of the truth in Clara's words. The air was electric, charged with the weight of unspoken truths. Suddenly, Clara felt a wave of vulnerability wash over her. She was exposing not just Grant's ignorance, but also her own fears and insecurities. "I'm just a janitor," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But I take pride in my work. I've spent my life cleaning up after others, making sure they have a clean space to thrive. That doesn't make me less than anyone in this room." Grant stood frozen, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. I never thought about it like that," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Clara pressed on, determined to make the moment count. "It's time for you to understand that every person in this building has a story. We all have dreams and families to care for. We all contribute in our own ways. Start looking beyond your privilege, Grant. It's time to change." As Clara finished her statement, a wave of applause erupted from the audience, surprising both her and Grant. Clara felt a rush of pride, the moment filling her with a warmth she hadn't expected. The recognition of her humanity, her worth, echoed through the hall, and she reveled in the support of the crowd. Grant, clearly flustered, took a step back, grappling with the reality that had just been thrust upon him. "I need to think," he muttered, almost to himself, before turning away from the podium. His arrogance had crumbled, leaving behind a vulnerable, confused young man. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the rush of adrenaline begin to fade. She hadn't just confronted Grant, she had stood up for herself and for every janitor who had ever been belittled and overlooked. She glanced around at the audience, their faces reflecting a mix of surprise, admiration, and a newfound understanding of the complexities of privilege. "I hope you take this to heart, Grant," Clara said, her voice steady as she addressed him one last time. "Your mother would be proud if you chose to be better." With that, she turned away from the stage, her heart still racing as she walked back to her cleaning cart. The applause continued behind her, a chorus of support that filled the air. Clara felt lighter. A weight lifted from her shoulders. She had made her voice heard, and in doing so, she had reclaimed her dignity. As she resumed her work, Clara overheard snippets of conversation among the audience, people discussing the impact of her words. For the first time, she felt seen, not just as the janitor, but as a person worthy of respect. In the corner of her eye, Clara noticed Grant standing at the back of the room, his head bowed, clearly lost in thought. She hoped he would take her words to heart, that he would emerge from this experience as a better man. The world around her felt different, charged with a new energy. Clara smiled to herself, knowing that she had not only confronted a millionaire, but had also sparked a moment of reflection that could change the course of their lives. As she mopped the floor, she thought of her mother and the lessons she had instilled in her. It was a small victory, but it was hers, and it was enough to remind her of her worth. The days following the confrontation in the Ainsworth corporate building were a whirlwind for Clara Jenkins. The incident had become the talk of the office, and she could feel the ripple effects of her words echoing through the corporate hallways. While she returned to her usual routine, the atmosphere around her had shifted. Employees greeted her with newfound respect, their smiles warmer, their acknowledgments more genuine. Clara had always believed in the power of hard work, but now it felt like her voice had made an indelible mark. Yet as Clara mopped the floors, she couldn't shake the lingering anxiety that danced at the edges of her mind. Grant Ainsworth had been visibly shaken after their confrontation, and she wondered how he was processing the event. She had caught glimpses of him in the days that followed, his confident stride replaced by an air of uncertainty. He often passed her in the hallway, eyes cast down, as if he were ashamed to meet her gaze. Clara felt a mix of satisfaction and concern. She had stood up for herself, but she also recognized the weight of the realization he was grappling with. One afternoon, as Clara was cleaning the executive offices on the top floor, she overheard snippets of conversation through the glass doors. A group of executives was gathered in a conference room, their voices rising in debate. Clara paused, instinctively listening as she dried the glass surfaces nearby. "I can't believe he would say something like that at the event," one of the executives said, clearly incredulous. "It's not just bad optics, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of our values. Grant needs to understand that he can't just dismiss people based on their roles," another voice chimed in. "His mother would be appalled if she were here to see this." Clara's heart raced as she'd realized they were discussing Grant and the fallout from the speech. It was a moment of validation for her. Her words had sparked a conversation, igniting a sense of accountability among the company's leaders. She felt a swell of pride as she continued cleaning, knowing she had played a part in this shift. But the pride was short-lived. Clara overheard a different conversation later that day. As she was sweeping the lobby, two junior employees were chatting near the elevator. "Did you hear about the meeting with Grant and the board?" one of them said, her voice laced with concern. "They're worried about his leadership. People are saying he might be losing touch with the company's values." Clara's heart sank. She had seen the potential in Grant to change. But what if this experience only pushed him further into a shell of entitlement? The thought of him retreating into a world of privilege, unlearning the lessons he had just begun to grasp, sparked a sense of urgency within her. She realized that the confrontation had opened a door, but it was up to Grant to step through it. Determined to reach out, Clara devised a plan. She would write him a letter, a simple note expressing her thoughts, reminding him of the importance of empathy and connection. It was a daunting task, but she felt compelled to act. As she returned home that night, Clara sat at her small kitchen table, pen in hand, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating the paper before her. "Dear Grant," she began, her handwriting steady and clear. "I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to take a moment to express my thoughts after our encounter at the event. It takes courage to confront our beliefs, and I know that this experience must be challenging for you." She paused, reflecting on the right words to choose. Clara wanted to convey understanding without dismissing the impact of his actions. "I believe we all have the capacity to grow and learn from our mistakes. Your mother was a remarkable woman who believed in kindness and the inherent value of every person. I hope you can honor her memory by embracing those values." As she continued writing, Clara felt a sense of release. She poured her heart into the letter, sharing her own journey, the lessons she had learned over the years, and the importance of treating everyone with respect, no matter their position. After a few heartfelt paragraphs, she signed off with a simple, "Best wishes, Clara." The next morning, Clara delivered the letter to the front desk of the Ainsworth corporate building, her heart racing with anticipation. She knew it was a small gesture, but she hoped it would resonate with Grant. Days turned into weeks, and while the initial buzz from the event faded, Clara remained vigilant. She watched as Grant navigated the office, still somewhat withdrawn, but she sensed a change in the way he interacted with others. He was beginning to engage in conversations, asking questions, and even expressing gratitude toward the staff who had once been invisible to him. One afternoon, as Clara was finishing her shift, she spotted Grant in the break room. He was speaking with a few employees, listening intently as they discussed their projects and ideas. Clara felt a flicker of hope as she observed the shift in his demeanor. Maybe, just maybe, he was beginning to understand the value of connection. But Clara's optimism was short-lived. The following day, she overheard Grant arguing with his assistant, a young woman named Lisa, who had always treated Clara with respect. "You don't understand the pressures I'm under," Grant exclaimed, frustration evident in his voice. "I can't just change everything overnight because of one incident." Clara's heart sank as she listened, the tension in Grant's voice resonating with the insecurity she had sensed in him. He was struggling to balance the expectations of his position with the lessons he had learned from their confrontation. It was a pivotal moment, and Clara knew he needed guidance to navigate this journey. Determined to help, Clara approached Lisa after her shift. "I overheard the conversation between you and Grant," she said gently. "I think he's having a hard time processing everything. He's been raised in a world where privilege blinds you to the realities of others. Maybe he just needs someone to help him see." Lisa nodded, understanding Clara's concern. "I've noticed the change in him, but he's still grappling with the expectations of his role. I think he feels cornered, like he has to prove himself to the board after everything that happened." "I understand," Clara replied, her determination firm. "What if we could create an opportunity for him to connect with the janitorial staff? Arrange a meeting where he can hear our stories, understand our lives. It might help him see the bigger picture." Lisa's eyes lit up with the idea. "That's a brilliant notion, Clara. I think it could really help him, if he's open to it." Clara felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this was the key to bridging the gap between Grant's privilege and the realities faced by those who worked beneath him. "I'll talk to him," she said, her voice steady. "I know he needs to hear it." The next day, Clara found herself standing outside Grant's office, her heart pounding. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of her mission. She knocked gently on the door, and after a brief pause, Grant called out for her to enter. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, looking surprised to see her. "What can I do for you?" "Grant," Clara began, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves, "I wanted to talk to you about something important." He leaned back in his chair, a hint of curiosity in his gaze. "Sure, what's on your mind?" Clara took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I know you've been through a lot since our encounter. I've been thinking about how to help you understand the perspectives of those who work behind the scenes, and I believe creating a space for connection could be beneficial." Grant furrowed his brow, clearly contemplating her words. "What do you mean?" "I'd like to propose a meeting, an informal gathering where you can interact with the janitorial staff," Clara explained. "It would give you a chance to hear our stories, our challenges, and perhaps help you see the value we bring to this company." Grant's expression shifted from skepticism to intrigue. "You really think that would make a difference?" "I do," Clara replied earnestly. "Sometimes it takes a personal connection to shift our perspectives. You have the opportunity to lead by example, to show that you value every individual here. It could change everything." For a moment, Grant was silent, lost in thought. Clara could see the wheels turning in his mind, the struggle between his upbringing and the desire to embrace a new understanding. "I'll think about it," he finally said, his voice softer than before. "Thank you for bringing this to me." Clara nodded, her heart filled with hope. She had planted a seed, and now it was up to Grant to nurture it. As she left his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that change was on the horizon. The days that followed Clara's proposal felt like a delicate dance, balancing hope and uncertainty. Clara observed Grant from a distance, noting the subtle changes in his interactions with the staff. He seemed more engaged and attentive, often pausing to chat with employees he had previously overlooked. Yet there was still a lingering tension in his demeanor, a flicker of anxiety that hinted at the internal struggle he was facing. Clara had given him a few days to consider her proposal for a meeting with the janitorial staff, but as the week progressed, she grew increasingly anxious. Would he follow through? Would he be willing to confront the discomfort of his privilege in a room filled with people he had once dismissed? Clara found herself mulling over the potential impact of this gathering, both on Grant and on the staff who had become her second family. Finally, on a crisp Wednesday morning, Clara received a message from Lisa. "Grant wants to set up the meeting next week. He's ready to hear you all out," she relayed, her tone filled with excitement. Clara's heart soared at the news, but a flicker of apprehension followed quickly. This meeting could be pivotal, but it also had the potential to be uncomfortable. As Clara prepared for the gathering, she found herself considering the scope of the discussions that could unfold. She envisioned a space where stories were shared, where each janitor could express their experiences and challenges, and where Grant could learn the real impact of his words and actions. She hoped that by opening this dialogue, he would embrace the values his mother had instilled in him and begin to foster a culture of respect within the company. The day of the meeting arrived, and Clara felt a mix of excitement and nerves as she made her way to the conference room. It was a large, glass-walled space on the top floor, with a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Clara arrived early, setting up a small table with refreshments, a simple touch to create a welcoming atmosphere. One by one, her colleagues arrived, each wearing expressions of curiosity and apprehension. Clara greeted them warmly, encouraging them to share their thoughts and feelings. As the time approached for Grant to join them, Clara could sense the tension in the room. "Are we really going to be heard?" one of her colleagues, a young janitor named Marcus, asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "What if he just tries to brush us off?" Clara placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. "This is our opportunity to speak our truths. Let's focus on sharing our stories. It's not just about one person. It's about all of us." The door swung open, and Grant stepped into the conference room, his demeanor slightly more relaxed than before. Clara could see the determination in his eyes as he surveyed the room, taking in the faces of the people he had once viewed as invisible. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady yet tinged with nervousness. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I know I have a lot to learn, and I genuinely want to hear your experiences." Clara felt a wave of hope wash over her. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the chance for Grant to truly listen. "Why don't we start with introductions?" Clara suggested, gesturing for everyone to share their names and a brief story about their journey. As each janitor spoke, the atmosphere shifted. Stories poured out, tales of long hours, sacrifices made for family, the pride in a job well done, and the pain of being overlooked. Marcus spoke about his aspirations to become a mechanic, sharing how he worked nights to support his studies while cleaning during the day. Another colleague, Rosa, shared her experience as a single mother, balancing her job with raising her children. Each story painted a vivid picture of resilience and determination, drawing Grant deeper into their world. Clara watched as Grant listened intently, his expression shifting from one of uncertainty to understanding. The more they shared, the more he began to grasp the realities of their lives. He asked questions, genuinely wanting to know more about their struggles and triumphs. As the meeting progressed, Clara felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. Each story resonated with the others, weaving a tapestry of shared experiences that highlighted the importance of respect and understanding. It was a cathartic moment for the janitorial staff, who had long felt invisible in the corporate landscape. Finally, Clara decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. "Grant," she said, her voice steady, "I know it's not easy to confront these realities, especially given your position. But it's important to acknowledge that your words have power. They can uplift or they can harm." Grant nodded, visibly moved by Clara's words. "I've learned that the hard way," he admitted. "I realize now how careless I was with my comments. I want to do better, but I need your help. How can I support you all moving forward?" The question hung in the air, and Clara felt a surge of hope. "We need you to advocate for us," she replied. "Help create a culture where everyone is valued, where every role is seen as essential to the company's success. It starts with respect, but it also requires action." The conversation flowed naturally from there, each person contributing ideas and solutions. They discussed implementing regular meetings to bridge the gap between management and staff, creating a mentorship program to support career growth, and establishing a recognition system to honor the hard work of janitors and support staff. As the meeting drew to a close, Clara took a moment to absorb the transformation that had taken place. Grant was no longer just a wealthy heir. He was a man willing to embrace change. The tension had dissolved, replaced by a sense of hope and camaraderie among the group. "Thank you all for sharing your stories," Grant said, his voice genuine. "I'm committed to making changes, and I promise to be an advocate for you moving forward." The room erupted into applause, and Clara felt tears of joy prick at the corners of her eyes. It was a moment of triumph, not just for her, but for everyone who had been overlooked for too long. As the group began to disperse, Clara lingered for a moment, watching Grant engage with her colleagues, his demeanor more open and approachable. She sensed the beginning of a new chapter, one where empathy and connection could flourish within the corporate culture. In the weeks following the meeting, Clara Jenkins felt a renewed sense of purpose as she observed the shifts happening within the Ainsworth corporate building. There was a palpable change in the atmosphere. Grant Ainsworth had taken the feedback from the janitorial staff to heart, beginning to implement initiatives that aimed to bridge the gap between executives and support staff. Clara felt a surge of pride as she watched her colleagues receive recognition for their hard work, a long overdue acknowledgement of their contributions to the company. However, beneath the surface of progress lay an undercurrent of tension. Clara could sense the unease among some executives who had been accustomed to the status quo. Rumors began to circulate about Grant's leadership style, with whispers suggesting that he was losing touch with the traditional values of the corporation. Clara knew that change was a double-edged sword. While it brought hope, it also invited resistance. One afternoon, as Clara was tidying up the break room, she overheard a conversation between two executives, Martin and Sarah, who were discussing Grant's recent initiatives. "This is a slippery slope, you know," Martin said, his tone laced with skepticism. "Grant is trying to make friends with the staff, but this isn't a charity. We need to maintain a level of professionalism." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "I understand what you're saying, but we can't ignore the fact that the staff is integral to our success. If we want to improve morale, we have to listen to them." Clara's heart raced as she listened. The tension between the old guard and the new vision was becoming more pronounced. She stepped back, quietly contemplating her role in this evolving environment. She had fought for respect and recognition, but now it felt like their progress was under threat. That evening, Clara received a call from Lisa, Grant's assistant. "Clara, can we meet? I think we need to discuss some concerns I've been hearing about Grant's initiatives," she said, her voice strained. Clara agreed to meet Lisa at a nearby cafe, feeling a sense of urgency. As she sat across from Lisa, she could see the worry etched on her face. "What's going on?" Clara asked, leaning in. "Things are heating up. Some of the executives are pushing back against Grant's changes, saying he's losing focus," Lisa explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "They think he's too involved with the janitorial staff and that it's damaging the company's image." Clara felt a knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "Some of them believe that if Grant continues on this path, it could jeopardize his position," Lisa continued, her eyes wide with concern. "There's talk of a board meeting where they might address these issues directly. I fear they'll try to undermine him." Clara's mind raced. The very changes they had fought for were now at risk of being dismantled. "We can't let that happen," she said, determination flooding her voice. "We need to show the board that the staff supports Grant and believes in the changes he's making." "But how?" Lisa asked, her brow furrowed. "The executives are powerful, and they have the ear of the board. We're just the janitorial staff. Maybe we can gather our stories again, show the board how these changes are impacting morale," Clara suggested, her mind churning with ideas. "If we can present a united front, it might help to sway their opinions." Lisa nodded, her expression brightening. "That's a great idea, Clara. We could organize a presentation, share our experiences and the positive outcomes of Grant's initiatives. It would be powerful to have everyone involved." Clara felt a surge of hope. "Let's do it. We can meet with the staff and prepare something impactful. We need to rally together." The next day, Clara called a meeting with her colleagues to discuss the plan. As they gathered in the break room, Clara could feel the energy in the room shift. "We have to stand together," she said, her voice steady. "There are concerns about the changes Grant is making, and we need to show our support. If we don't speak up now, we risk losing everything we fought for." The group nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. Clara encouraged everyone to share their stories, emphasizing the positive changes they had experienced since the meeting with Grant. They brainstormed ideas for the presentation, focusing on the impact of recognition and the importance of unity in the workplace. As they worked together, Clara felt a sense of camaraderie building among her colleagues. They shared laughter and stories, bonding over their shared experiences. It was a moment of empowerment, a reminder that they were not alone in this fight. In the days leading up to the board meeting, Clara and her colleagues poured their hearts into creating a presentation that would showcase the importance of valuing every member of the team. They crafted slides filled with personal stories, statistics on employee morale, and visual representations of the changes that had already begun to take root. On the day of the board meeting, Clara arrived early to set up the presentation in the conference room. She felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as she arranged the materials, her heart racing at the thought of addressing the board. As her colleagues filed in, Clara could see the determination in their eyes. When the meeting began, Clara took a deep breath and stepped forward to introduce their presentation. Grant sat at the front of the room, a look of gratitude and support on his face. "Thank you all for being here," he said, gesturing for Clara to begin. Clara felt the weight of the moment settle over her. "Today we want to share our stories and the impact of the changes Grant has initiated," she said, her voice steady. "We believe that by valuing every member of this organization, we can create a culture of respect and collaboration that benefits us all." As Clara spoke, she glanced at Grant, who nodded encouragingly. She could see the board members' expressions shift as they listened to the heartfelt stories shared by her colleagues. Each narrative painted a vivid picture of the struggles faced by the janitorial staff and the pride they took in their work. "Since the changes began, our morale has improved significantly," one of her colleagues shared. "We feel valued, and it has made us more motivated to contribute to the company's success." Clara could sense the board members leaning in, intrigued by the authenticity of the stories being told. It was a pivotal moment, and Clara felt empowered by the unity in the room. But just as Clara began to feel a surge of hope, the atmosphere shifted. A board member named Charles, known for his conservative views, interjected, While these stories are touching, we must remember that business is about results. How do we quantify the impact of these changes on our bottom line? Clara's heart sank. She could sense the tension rising again, and she felt the weight of the challenge ahead. Respect and recognition aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, she countered, her voice firm. They create a culture where employees are motivated to perform at their best. It's an investment in the future of this company. But Charles remained unconvinced, his expression steely. Respect is important, but we can't forget the need for profitability. This is a business, after all. The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Clara felt the anxiety rise within her, but she refused to back down. She turned to Grant, her heart racing. "We need to show them the potential for growth that comes from investing in people," she said, determination fueling her words. Grant nodded, his expression resolute. "I believe in these changes, and I will fight for them," he said, his voice steady. "We can't let fear dictate our future. We must be willing to take risks to create a better workplace for everyone." As the meeting continued, Clara felt the tension ebb and flow, the conversation shifting between skepticism and hope. But deep down, Clara knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would require resilience and unity to navigate. As the board meeting continued, Clara sensed that the atmosphere had shifted. The tension in the room was palpable, and the board members were divided. Some leaned forward, intrigued by the stories being shared, while others maintained a guarded posture, clearly resistant to the idea of change. Clara's heart raced as she watched the dynamics unfold, each comment becoming a potential turning point. After Grant's declaration of support, another board member, Linda, who had always been a proponent of progressive changes, chimed in. "I think it's essential to consider the human element in our business model," she said, her voice steady. "Investing in employee morale doesn't just create a positive work environment. It can lead to increased productivity and loyalty. We've seen that in companies that prioritize their staff." Clara felt a flicker of hope at Linda's words, but she knew they needed to capitalize on this momentum. "Exactly," Clara interjected, feeling emboldened. "When employees feel valued, they are more likely to take pride in their work and contribute positively to the company's success. This isn't just about numbers. It's about building a culture where everyone feels they belong." Charles scoffed, clearly unconvinced. "But how do we measure that? We need metrics, something concrete that shows this approach works. Otherwise, it's all just feel-good rhetoric." Clara took a deep breath, her mind racing. "We can't always quantify respect and dignity," she replied, her voice steady. "However, we can look at turnover rates, employee satisfaction surveys, and productivity. When people feel respected, they are less likely to leave, and that can save the company money in the long run." Another board member, a younger man named David, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "I think what Clara is saying is important. We're at a turning point in corporate culture. If we want to attract and retain talent, especially in today's market, we need to prioritize the well-being of our employees." Clara felt a surge of hope at David's words. Perhaps there were allies within the board who understood the importance of this shift. "Exactly," she said, seizing the opportunity. "We're not just janitors, we're people with families, dreams, and aspirations. This company's success is built on our hard work, and it's time we're recognized for that." The discussion continued, with Clara and her colleagues sharing more stories, each one reinforcing the idea that a respectful workplace could lead to a more productive and innovative environment. Grant chimed in periodically, echoing their sentiments and emphasizing the need for change. Clara could see the board members beginning to soften, their expressions shifting from skepticism to contemplation. But just as Clara felt they were making headway, another voice rose from the back of the room. It was Martin, the same executive who had expressed concerns earlier. "This is all very touching," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But let's not forget that we have shareholders to answer to. If these changes don't lead to immediate results, we risk our standing in the market." Clara felt a wave of frustration wash over her. "And if we ignore the human element, we risk losing the very foundation of this company. We're talking about a long-term vision, not just short-term gains," she countered, her voice rising slightly. The debate intensified, with members of the board arguing back and forth. Clara could feel the tension mounting, the stakes higher than ever. It was evident that the meeting was becoming a battleground for differing philosophies about leadership and corporate culture. Perhaps we should consider a pilot program, Linda suggested, attempting to steer the conversation. We could implement some of these changes on a smaller scale and measure the results over the next few months. That way we can gather data without committing fully up front. Clara seized this opening. That's a great idea. A pilot program could allow us to showcase the benefits of a more inclusive approach while providing measurable results for the board to analyze. We could set specific goals and track our progress. The room fell silent for a moment as the board members processed the suggestion. Clara's heart raced. This could be the breakthrough they needed. After a few tense moments, Grant spoke up. I'm fully on board with this idea. Let's implement a pilot program that includes regular feedback from both staff and management. We can create a framework that allows us to measure success while also ensuring that everyone feels heard. Slowly, the board members began to nod in agreement, and Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. Perhaps they were on the brink of a significant shift after all. All right, let's outline the parameters of this pilot program, Charles said, finally relenting. We can start with a 6-month timeline to evaluate the effectiveness of these initiatives. As the discussion continued, Clara felt a sense of camaraderie building in the room. The board was beginning to see the value of integrating feedback from the very people who made the company function. It was a monumental step toward fostering a culture of respect and appreciation. The meeting came to a close and Clara's heart swelled with pride. They had faced resistance, but they had also made significant strides toward change. Grant turned to Clara as the board members began to file out. Thank you for your courage today. You really made a difference, he said, sincerity evident in his eyes. Clara smiled, feeling the weight of their efforts lifting. We did this together, Grant. It's just the beginning, but I believe we can keep pushing for more. As the room emptied, Clara and her colleagues exchanged hopeful glances. They had stood together, shared their stories, and made their voices heard. Change was not just a possibility. It was becoming a reality, but as Clara packed up her materials, she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. The old guard wouldn't simply fade away. They would continue to push back against the evolving culture. Clara knew they would need to remain vigilant, ready to advocate for the respect and recognition they deserved. That evening, as Clara returned home, she reflected on the day's events. She felt a mixture of hope and determination, recognizing the challenges ahead. The road to change would be fraught with obstacles, but she was committed to fighting for a workplace where every individual felt valued. In her heart, Clara believed that this was more than just a fight for recognition. It was a fight for dignity, respect, and the right to be seen as a fundamental part of the corporate fabric. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Clara and her colleagues prepared for the pilot program that would test the ideas they had presented to the board. Clara felt a renewed sense of hope, but she also understood that the real work was just beginning. The excitement of change was palpable, yet she knew that resistance still lurked within the halls of the Ainsworth corporate building. As Clara worked her shifts, she noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. Grant was increasingly engaged with the janitorial staff, often stopping to chat and ask about their experiences. He made a concerted effort to include them in conversations about the company's future, fostering an environment of collaboration. Yet Clara also sensed the tension among some of the executives who had been hesitant about the changes. One afternoon, as Clara was cleaning the executive kitchen, she overheard a conversation between Martin and Sarah. This pilot program is a waste of resources, Martin was saying, his voice laced with frustration. We shouldn't be pandering to the janitorial staff. They don't understand the complexities of running a business. Clara's heart sank. She had hoped that the board's decision would bring about a more open-minded approach, but it seemed some executives were still clinging to outdated beliefs. She took a deep breath and decided it was time to confront the issue head-on. That evening, Clara gathered her courage and approached Lisa, who was still working late. We need to address the resistance from the upper management, Clara said, her voice steady. If we don't do something now, the pilot program might not succeed. Lisa nodded, her expression serious. You're right. We need to rally the staff and remind them that their voices matter. Maybe we can organize a meeting to discuss our experiences with the pilot program so far. If we can show the executives the tangible benefits, it might help sway their opinions. With a plan in place, Clara and Lisa began reaching out to their colleagues, encouraging them to share their experiences, both positive and negative, regarding the changes initiated by Grant. They set a date for a meeting and prepared to present a united front. On the day of the meeting, Clara felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The break room was filled with her colleagues, each one eager to share their stories. Clara stood at the front, her heart swelling with pride at the sight of her fellow janitors coming together. "Thank you all for being here," Clara began, her voice steady. "We've made significant strides with the pilot program, but we need to ensure that our voices are heard. Our experiences matter, and we have the power to influence the direction of this company." As colleagues began to share their stories, Clara felt the energy in the room shift. One by one, they spoke about the positive changes they had experienced, how they felt more included in discussions, how recognition had boosted morale, and how they were more motivated to contribute to the company's success. "It's like we finally matter," Marcus said, his voice filled with emotion. "I feel proud to come to work each day, knowing that my efforts are acknowledged." Clara watched as her colleagues opened up, their vulnerability strengthening the bond between them. The stories flowed, and as each person shared, Clara felt a sense of unity growing in the room. They were no longer just a group of janitors. They were a powerful collective with a shared purpose. After the meeting, Clara and Lisa compiled the feedback and prepared to present it to Grant and the board. They highlighted the positive impacts the pilot program had on morale and productivity, emphasizing the importance of continuing these initiatives. When the day of the presentation arrived, Clara felt a mix of nerves and excitement. She stood alongside Lisa, ready to share the voices of their colleagues. Grant sat at the front, his expression supportive, ready to advocate for the changes they had all fought for. As they presented the feedback, Clara felt the energy in the room shift once again. The board members listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to contemplation. Clara noticed Charles, who had been a vocal critic of the changes, leaning forward, clearly engaged in the discussion. "While I still have concerns," Charles said, his tone softer than before, "I can't deny the positive impact these stories illustrate. It seems there's a tangible benefit to investing in employee morale." Linda chimed in, "I think we should consider expanding this pilot program. If it's making such a difference, why not take it company-wide?" Clara felt hope blossom in her chest. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. "We believe that creating an inclusive culture can yield long-term benefits for the company," Clara replied, her voice steady. "We want to continue showcasing our collective impact." As the presentation continued, Clara could sense the tide turning. The board members began to discuss potential next steps, considering how to implement the changes on a larger scale. Clara felt a sense of pride swell within her as she listened to her colleagues' voices resonating through the room. Finally, Grant spoke up, his voice filled with conviction. "I believe in this initiative and the value of our staff. If we want to be a leader in our industry, we need to embrace change and foster a culture of respect and collaboration." As the meeting drew to a close, the board members expressed their support for the expansion of the pilot program. The atmosphere shifted from one of skepticism to one of optimism. Clara felt a rush of exhilaration. They had done it. They had turned the tide. In the days that followed, the changes began to take shape. The company implemented regular feedback sessions, established a mentorship program, and created channels for open communication between management and staff. Clara watched as her colleagues flourished in this new environment, their confidence growing alongside their contributions. But with progress came challenges. Martin remained a vocal opponent, often questioning the initiatives during board meetings. Clara knew that the fight for respect and recognition was far from over. It was a continual battle against the remnants of old beliefs and attitudes. One afternoon, as Clara was cleaning the executive office, she overheard Martin speaking with another executive. "These changes are turning the company into a charity," he exclaimed. "We need to return to our roots." Clara's heart raced. She knew she had to intervene. Taking a deep breath, she knocked on the door and entered. "Excuse me, Martin," she said, her voice steady. "I couldn't help but overhear your comments." Martin looked taken aback, but quickly regained his composure. "What do you want, Clara?" "I want to remind you that this company's success is built on the hard work of every individual, including the janitorial staff," she replied, her voice firm. "We're not asking for charity, we're asking for respect. When employees feel valued, they work harder and contribute more effectively." The room fell silent and Martin's expression hardened. "You don't understand the complexities of running a business," he shot back. Perhaps you're the one who doesn't understand, Clara countered, her heart racing. Business is about people. If we want to thrive, we need to foster a culture that values every individual's contributions. Ignoring that will only lead to failure. With that, Clara stepped out of the office, her heart pounding. She had stood up for herself and her colleagues, and in doing so, she had reinforced the importance of their fight. As the weeks progressed, the initiatives continued to flourish. More employees began to feel empowered to share their ideas, and the company culture shifted toward one of collaboration and respect. Clara felt a sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. Finally, the day came for the company-wide meeting where Grant would address all employees about the success of the pilot program and the vision for the future. Clara sat among her colleagues, anticipation buzzing in the air. As Grant took the stage, Clara felt a sense of pride swell within her. "Today we celebrate the changes we've made together," he began, his voice resonating through the auditorium. "These changes are not just about policies. They are about people. Each one of you plays a vital role in the success of Ainsworth Enterprises, and it's time we recognize that." The audience erupted in applause, Clara's heart swelling with joy. They had come so far, and the journey had only just begun. As the applause subsided, Grant continued, "I want to thank Clara Jenkins and the janitorial staff for their courage and for reminding us of what truly matters. We are committed to fostering a culture of respect, inclusivity, and collaboration." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes as she absorbed the moment. It wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had fought for recognition, respect, and dignity. They had faced challenges, but they had emerged stronger. As the meeting concluded, Clara and her colleagues exchanged smiles, knowing that they had made a difference. They had turned the tide, and now the company was poised for a brighter future. In that moment, Clara understood that the fight for respect and recognition was ongoing. It would require vigilance, unity, and a commitment to change. But she also knew that together, they could continue to push for a culture where every voice mattered. As Clara walked out of the auditorium, she felt a surge of hope for the future. They had created a space where everyone could thrive, and she was proud to have played a part in that transformation. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.